Alright folks, are you ready to dive into a mystery? Because today, we're cracking open a case that's probably the hottest, most talked about cold case of its time, a case that even thousands of years later still sends chills down our spines and gets us thinking. And no, we're not talking about some modern-day crime thriller, but something even older. We're talking about the case of Oedipus Rex. Sound familiar? It should. This is one of the most famous stories in all of Greek mythology, a classic drama that pretty much everyone learns about in literature class. But hold on a second, have you ever really stopped and asked yourself, what is the Oedipus Rex case really about? Is it just some grim curse from the gods, or is there something deeper hidden beneath that tragic surface, some secret about human nature that we haven't yet uncovered? Today, let's flip through every page of this special case file. We're not just going to retell this thrilling story. We're going to analyze it, dissect it piece by piece, and from there, extract some valuable lessons, some real insights for our modern lives. So come on, imagine you're a brilliant detective, put on your trench coat, grab your magnifying glass, and let's travel back in time to ancient Thebes. Follow the clues, interview the witnesses, and solve the enigmatic case known as Oedipus Rex. Are you ready? Let's get started. Picture this, the magnificent city of Thebes, where even the sunlight seems to dim under the oppressive gloom. The opening of our case file is a stark picture, a scene of heartbreaking mourning that takes your breath away. Can you hear that sound? It's not festive music, and it's definitely not cheerful laughter. It's the wail of lament echoing from every street corner, the groans of the sick, the heavy sighs of the survivors. Plague, an invisible and merciless scourge, has descended upon Thebes, sowing terror into every home, every street. No one, nothing can escape its clutches. Old and young, men and women, strong and weak, all are falling. Imagine, even newborn Barbies, the very seeds of life, are departing this world before they even get to know it. The golden wheat fields, once so vibrant, are now barren, cracked, yielding no grain. Crop failure and famine spread, plunging the people of Thebes into utter misery. Not just humans, but livestock and pets are dying in droves, their carcasses littering the land. The once bustling, prosperous city is now desolate, silent as a giant graveyard. A heavy, suffocating atmosphere hangs in the air, so thick that people feel suffocated, wanting to flee. But where to escape when the plague has spread everywhere, when death is lurking in every corner? In that bleak atmosphere, faith and hope seem to have withered, leaving only despair to engulf everything. In this utter adversity, when darkness seemed to have swallowed the entire city, the people of Thebes still hadn't completely lost their last glimmer of hope. They turned to their king, Oedipus. Hearing the name Oedipus, maybe you already feel a bit reassured, right? Because Oedipus was no ordinary king. He wasn't born and raised in Thebes. In fact, he was from Corinth, a distant land. But fate led him to Thebes and transformed him into the city's savior. Do you remember the story of the Sphinx? That monster with the body of a lion and the head of a woman, with its perplexing riddles, had once terrorized Thebes, forcing its people to offer up humans for it to devour. No one dared to confront the Sphinx until Oedipus arrived. With his extraordinary intelligence, Oedipus solved the Sphinx's riddle, defeated the monster, and freed Thebes from its cruel reign. In gratitude, the people of Thebes honored Oedipus, making him their king and giving him Queen Jocasta, the widow of the previous king, Laius, as his wife. Oedipus, from a stranger, had become the king beloved and respected by the people of Thebes. They believed he was the one who could bring peace and prosperity back to their city. And Oedipus, not failing the expectations of his people, stepped forward to shoulder the heavy responsibility. With his inherent intelligence and deep compassion, he promised the people of Thebes that he would find the cause of the plague and save the city from this catastrophe. You see, Oedipus didn't flinch in the face of difficulty. He was ready to face the challenge, just as he had faced the Sphinx years ago. The people of Thebes once again placed their complete faith in their heroic king. To find a way to resolve the plague, Oedipus made a crucial move. He sent Creon, Queen Jocasta's brother, to Delphi, the most sacred religious center of ancient Greece. Delphi was famous for the temple of Apollo and the powerful prophecies of the oracle, the priestess who, on behalf of the god Apollo, conveyed the divine will. The ancient Greeks believed that the oracle of Delphi could see into the future and answer all of humanity's questions. Oedipus hoped that the oracle of Delphi would pinpoint the root cause of the plague and the way to appease the god's anger. And then Creon returned from Delphi, bearing a message, a prophecy that was earth-shattering, like a thunderbolt from a clear sky. The oracle's words echoed throughout Thebes, sowing confusion and horror in the hearts of the people. The plague you are suffering is due to defilement. This defilement originates from the fact that the killer of King Laius, Oedipus's predecessor, has not yet been punished. The evildoer still roams free, living among you, spreading disaster upon Thebes. The oracle of Delphi's prophecy was like a death sentence hanging over the city of Thebes. It not only revealed the cause of the plague, but also set a daunting and dangerous task for Oedipus. He must find the killer of King Laius and punish him. Only then would the plague cease and the city be freed. Imagine, Oedipus has to confront a mysterious murderer, one who could be hiding anywhere in the city. Moreover, this murder happened a long time ago, the clues probably erased by time. But Oedipus has no other choice. For the fate of the entire city, for the lives of the people of Thebes, he is compelled to embark on this arduous and perilous investigation. At this point, we can clearly see one thing. The Oedipus Rex case is not just a simple criminal case, not just about finding a murderer and bringing him to justice. It carries a deeper meaning, related to the fate of the entire city of Thebes, to the punishment of the gods, to the order of the cosmos. The question is not only who killed King Laius, but also why does the killer of King Laius cause the plague? Is there a mysterious connection between a crime in the past and a disaster in the present? And can Oedipus decipher this mystery, save Thebes from the brink of destruction? Let's continue to turn the next pages of the case file to find the answers, shall we? All right, we've got the oracle's shocking prophecy, and Oedipus knows he has to find Laius's killer to save Thebes. The only way to do that is to delve into the past, to seek out anyone who might have witnessed the murder that happened so long ago. Oedipus, in his role as the chief detective of Thebes, has begun this arduous investigation. Let's follow him, listen to the testimonies of each witness, and see what secrets are about to be revealed. The first witness Oedipus summons is Tiresias, the most famous blind prophet in all of Greece. Did you catch that? The very first witness is blind. Sounds strange, right? How can a blind man see the truth? But in the mysterious world of Greek mythology, anything is possible. People believed that those deprived of earthly sight were sometimes granted a special kind of vision, an ability to see into the hearts of men, to peer through the veil of the present and see the past and future. Tiresias was just such a man. He was known for his profound wisdom and his unerring prophetic abilities. Oedipus believed Tiresias could help him uncover the truth about King Laius's murder. In an atmosphere of solemnity and tension, Oedipus posed the direct question to Tiresias. "Great prophet, please tell me, who is the one who murdered King Laius? Who is it that is spreading the plague upon Thebes?" And do you know how Tiresias responded? His answer wasn't some unfamiliar name, not some enemy from outside the city. It was a terrifying accusation aimed directly at the reigning king himself, the man who was desperately seeking justice. "You are the killer you seek. You, Oedipus, are the one who murdered King Laius." Can you believe your ears? A direct accusation, no beating around the bush, pointed straight at Oedipus, the wise king, the hero of Thebes. Oedipus must have been utterly stunned, even enraged, to hear these words. How could this be? He, Oedipus, the savior of Thebes, the killer of King Laius, a man he had never even met. This accusation was too absurd, too illogical, impossible to believe. Oedipus's initial reaction, unsurprisingly, was anger, skepticism, and rejection of Tiresias's prophecy. With his arrogant nature and overconfidence in his own intelligence, Oedipus assumed Tiresias was a liar, someone bribed by dark forces to slander and harm him. Oedipus didn't hesitate to use harsh words, even insults, to offend the blind prophet. He dismissed Tiresias as a charlatan, exploiting his reputation to deceive others. But you know, in mythological stories, especially Greek myths, prophecies are rarely wrong. The gods, through the oracle and prophets, determined human fate, and humans, no matter how hard they tried to escape, could not escape the inescapable net of destiny. So why didn't Oedipus, an intelligent and experienced man, believe Tiresias's prophecy? Could it be that his own spiritual blindness, his arrogance and pride, clouded his reason, preventing him from seeing the truth even when it was right in front of his eyes? This is perhaps one of Oedipus's greatest tragedies. He was sighted in body, but blind in soul, unable to see the truth about himself. After rejecting Tiresias's prophecy, Oedipus suspected another person, Creon, Queen Jocasta's brother, the one he had sent to Delphi for the prophecy. In his anger and confusion, Oedipus conceived the idea that Creon might be plotting to overthrow him, seize the throne of Thebes. And to carry out this plot, Creon had colluded with Tiresias, staging this whole charade of accusing him of killing King Laius. It sounds far-fetched, but in desperation, people often readily believe in conspiracy theories, especially when they help them escape a harsh truth. Oedipus immediately summoned Creon and interrogated him fiercely, his words full of accusation and suspicion. He gave Creon no chance to explain, refusing to listen to anything. Oedipus was completely consumed by anger and fear, losing his ability to judge objectively and wisely. Creon, faced with Oedipus's baseless accusations, was utterly surprised and hurt. To clear his own name, and also to shed light on the Laius murder case, Creon recounted the details of the previous king's death. "Your Majesty, on his return from Delphi, King Laius was attacked and killed by a band of robbers on his pilgrimage." This detail of the band of robbers that Creon offered at first glance seems plausible, but if you pay close attention, you'll immediately notice a major contradiction here. Tiresias's prophecy asserted that Oedipus himself was Laius's killer. Creon's testimony, however, said Laius was killed by a band of robbers. So who is telling the truth? Which account is believable? Oedipus, in his confusion, clung to the band of robbers' detail like a lifeline. He reassured himself that Tiresias's prophecy was baseless because he had only killed one man at a crossroads many years ago and had no connection to any band of robbers. Oedipus was trying to reassure himself, to convince himself that he was innocent, that he was not Laius's killer. But can you see anything suspicious here? Why would a noble king be killed by a mere band of robbers? Could there be another reason behind Laius's death that Creon is deliberately hiding? And why does Creon emphasize this band of robbers detail so much? Could it be that Creon himself is also hiding something, or at least intentionally steering the story in a different direction, to protect himself or someone else? The contradiction in Creon's testimony and Oedipus's attempt to deceive himself pushed the case into a dead end. Tiresias's prophecy was too unbelievable. Creon's testimony was full of suspicion. Oedipus seemed to be lost in a maze of lies and doubt, not knowing what was truth and what was falsehood. To clarify all doubts, Oedipus decided to seek out the final witness, the one who could bring light to this case. This was the shepherd, the only survivor of the ambush that killed King Laius years ago. This shepherd, according to Creon's account, had fled the scene of the crime and had never appeared since. It took Oedipus a great deal of effort to find and summon this shepherd. And finally, the shepherd appeared before Oedipus. You can feel the hesitation and fear clearly etched on his face. The shepherd seemed reluctant, afraid, unwilling to reveal the truth. He tried to evade Oedipus's questions, seeking to shirk responsibility. Perhaps he had buried this secret in his heart for too long and feared that when the truth was exposed, it would cause unforeseen consequences. But before Oedipus's persistence, his relentless questioning, the shepherd finally had to speak up, revealing what he had witnessed years ago. And the shepherd's testimony truly shattered all of Oedipus's illusions. There was no band of robbers. King Laius, the noble king of Thebes, was killed by a single person, and that person none other than Oedipus. Not only that, the shepherd revealed another terrifying secret, a secret perhaps even more horrific than the murder of the king. He recounted that many years ago, when he was still a young shepherd, he had worked for King Laius. King Laius and Queen Jocasta had had a son, but fearing the prophecy that the child would kill his father and marry his mother, they had ordered the shepherd to take the newborn infant to the desolate Mount Cithaeron, abandoning him to fate. But the shepherd, out of compassion, couldn't bring himself to kill the innocent child. He saved him and gave him to another shepherd from Corinth. And the abandoned newborn infant of years past, the child saved by the shepherd's compassion, the child who grew up in Corinth and became the hero who rescued Thebes, was none other than Oedipus. Can you imagine it? All the final pieces have fallen into place. The oracle of Delphi's prophecy, Tiresias's testimony, Creon's testimony, the shepherd's testimony, the scar on Oedipus's foot, the crossroads, everything connected perfectly, forming a complete picture of the Oedipus Rex case. The horrifying truth has been exposed, nothing more can be hidden. Oedipus, the wise king of Thebes, turned out to be the very killer of his father and husband of his mother, the one he had been searching for day and night to punish. Utter tragedy had struck, not only for Oedipus, but for the entire city of Thebes and all those involved. At this point, we have enough testimony from the witnesses. You see, the truth is not simple. It is often hidden under layers of disguise, by the lies of others, and even by the self-deception of ourselves. Tiresias's prophecy, initially rejected by Oedipus, turned out to be true. Creon's testimony, seemingly harmless, contained a crucial detail, the band of robbers detail that misled Oedipus. And the shepherd's testimony, seemingly unrelated to the Laius murder case, was the final piece to complete the case, exposing the horrifying truth about Oedipus's identity. What is the lesson here? Sometimes the truth lies right before our eyes, but we deliberately avoid it, afraid to face it. Like Oedipus, because of his overconfidence in himself, his arrogance and blindness, he ignored the warning signs, refused to listen to the advice of others, and ultimately paid a heavy price. Truth, no matter how harsh, will eventually prevail. And when the truth is exposed, tragedy is almost inevitable, especially when that truth involves the darkest secrets of the past, unintentional crimes, and forbidden incestuous relationships. Let's continue with the case file to see how the Oedipus Rex tragedy will come to an end, shall we? After listening to the conflicting and mysterious testimonies, you must also feel that the Oedipus Rex case is not simple, right? To clarify everything, we need to carefully examine the evidence that has been collected. But hold on, when we talk about evidence, in an ancient mythological story, don't imagine familiar things like fingerprints, DNA, or surveillance cameras. Here, evidence carries a different meaning, deeper and more symbolic. They are small details, objects seemingly inanimate, but containing important messages, hints that help us decode the mystery of the story. Let's go through each piece of evidence, one by one, and see what they reveal about the Oedipus Rex case. First, let's talk about Jocasta's brooch. Do you remember, after the horrifying truth was exposed, Queen Jocasta couldn't bear the overwhelming shock. In utter despair, she took her own life, and the object she used to commit suicide was the magnificent brooch on her royal robe. It sounds simple, but think about it. Why a brooch? Why would a piece of jewelry, originally symbolizing beauty and nobility, become an instrument of death? Could it be that the brooch here is not just evidence in a suicide case, but also carries a deeper symbolic meaning? I believe that Jocasta's brooch is a symbol of artificial beauty, of concealment, of hidden truth. You see, Jocasta was a beautiful, powerful woman, admired by everyone. The brooch further enhanced her magnificent, noble beauty, concealing the pain, the dark secrets hidden deep inside. Just like the glamorous exterior of the city of Thebes, concealing the plague and defilement gnawing from within. The brooch, with its outward beauty, deceived everyone, preventing them from recognizing the decay within. And when the truth was exposed, when the outer shell was shattered, tragedy struck, and nothing could be salvaged. The brooch, from a symbol of beauty, transformed into a symbol of disgrace and unredeemable pain. It reminds us that outward beauty is sometimes just a facade concealing the truth, and the truth, no matter how harsh, will eventually be revealed. Next, let's consider the scar on Oedipus's foot. This is perhaps one of the most important details in this case file. Do you remember our last witness, the shepherd? He was the one who recognized Oedipus not only by hearsay, but also by a special sign, the scar on the great king's foot. That scar wasn't there by chance. It was the result of a cruel act, when King Laius and Queen Jocasta, wanting to escape the grim prophecy, ordered their servant to abandon their newborn son on Mount Cithaeron. To prevent the child from crawling away, they pierced the baby's ankles with pins. That wound left a permanent scar, an indelible mark on Oedipus's body. The scar on Oedipus's foot, in my opinion, is a symbol of abandonment, of cruel fate, but also a sign of recognition, a key to unlocking the secret of Oedipus's identity. You see, from the moment he was born, Oedipus was abandoned by his parents, pushed into a life-or-death situation. Cruel fate seemed to have haunted him from the very beginning. But it was the scar, the trace of that abandonment, that became the most important evidence for the shepherd to recognize Oedipus, for the truth about his identity to be exposed. The scar, from a sign of pain and misfortune, transformed into a sign of recognition and truth. It shows that even the worst things in life, the heart wounds that seem unhealable, sometimes contain deep meanings which can lead us to truth and liberation. And finally, we cannot ignore the crossroads, where Oedipus unintentionally killed King Laius, his own father. The crossroads, a place that seems ordinary, meaningless, but in the Oedipus Rex story, it becomes important evidence, an indispensable piece of fate. Imagine, a crossroads is where many roads intersect, where we have to make a choice, decide which direction to turn. In life, we always face such crossroads, moments when we have to make important decisions that can completely change our lives. The crossroads in the Oedipus Rex story, in my opinion, is a symbol of choice, of fate, of life's turning point. Oedipus, on his way to escape the prophecy, unintentionally arrived at that fateful crossroads. There he met King Laius and a conflict ensued. Oedipus, in a fit of rage, killed the old man, not knowing that he was his own father. The act of killing at the crossroads was not only a crime, but also a fateful turning point, pushing Oedipus into a spiral of inescapable tragedy. The crossroads, from a neutral location, became the place where tragedy occurred, where Oedipus's fate took a completely different turn. It reminds us that every choice we make, no matter how small, can lead to unforeseen consequences, can completely change our lives. And sometimes, the very actions we think are to escape fate inadvertently bring us closer to it. You see the brooch, the scar on the foot, the crossroads, three pieces of evidence, seemingly disparate, unrelated to each other, but when we put them together, connect them, a complete picture gradually emerges. It is a tragic picture of Oedipus's life, a picture painted by fate, by ignorance, and by the actions of humans themselves. These pieces of fate have led Oedipus step by step to the horrifying truth, a truth he never dared to dream of. He is the killer of his father and the husband of his mother. This truth, when exposed, became too great a shock, an unbearable burden for both Oedipus and Jocasta. They could not face it, could not accept the horrifying truth about themselves and their family, and tragedy struck as an inevitable consequence of their crimes and ignorance. At this point, perhaps another question arises in your mind. Is Oedipus really a victim of fate, or is he still responsible for his own tragedy? This is a big question, a controversial issue not only in the Oedipus Rex story, but also throughout the history of philosophy and literature. On one hand, we clearly see that Oedipus is a victim of a cruel prophecy. From the moment he was born, fate was ordained for him that he would kill his father and marry his mother. Although his parents tried to escape the prophecy by abandoning him, although Oedipus also tried to flee fate by leaving Corinth, in the end, all those efforts were in vain. Fate still haunted him, like an invisible ghost, and pushed him into a spiral of inescapable tragedy. In this case, it seems that Oedipus is just a puppet in the hands of fate, a helpless victim of supernatural forces. But on the other hand, we cannot deny that Oedipus still had his own choices, and those choices contributed to his tragedy. The prophecy only said that he would kill his father and marry his mother, but it did not force him to do so. Oedipus could have chosen a different path, a different way of behaving. For example, when he met the stranger at the crossroads, he could have restrained his anger, avoided conflict, and perhaps the tragedy would not have happened. Or when Tiresias warned him of the truth, he could have listened and pondered, instead of arrogantly rejecting the prophecy. It was Oedipus's arrogance, his hot-temperedness, and his blindness that pushed him into tragedy, not entirely fate's arrangement. So ultimately, what is fate? Is it an invisible, irresistible force that completely dominates human life? Or is it the synthesis of our choices, our actions, whether intentional or unintentional, that create our own fate? This question probably has no or deren or zerenache enyerukratkoi single, clear answer. The tragedy of Oedipus Rex perhaps wants to send us a message that human life is always an intersection, a tug-of-war between fate and free will. We cannot completely control fate, but we always have the right to choose how to face it, how to behave, and take responsibility for our actions. And it is those choices that will shape each person's fate. Take some time to ponder this, will you? After all the horrifying truth was exposed, tragedy truly struck, and no one could escape it. When the shepherd spoke, his testimony was like a fatal knife, each word a deadly cut into the hearts of Oedipus and Jocasta. The harsh truth was like an earthquake, shaking the very foundations of their lives, shattering every illusion, every belief they had built. Oedipus and Jocasta completely collapsed before the terrifying truth about their identities and crimes. Can you imagine what they must have felt at that moment? It wasn't just pain, shame, but also horror, disgust at themselves. They had unintentionally committed heinous crimes, things that people fear and forbid the most, patricide and incest with their mother. The burden of guilt was too great, too much for an ordinary person to bear. Jocasta, the mother, the wife, the noble queen of Thebes, could not face this horrifying truth. She, once a symbol of beauty and power, was now completely broken, shattered. In utter despair, she chose death to free herself from disgrace and suffering. Jocasta's suicide was not just a physical death, but also a complete spiritual collapse, an absolute surrender to cruel fate. Her death was a silent confession of guilt, of helplessness, and of her family's tragedy. Jocasta chose to escape the truth through death, but did death truly bring her liberation, or was it just a cowardly escape from responsibility and conscience? This question will probably remain unanswered forever. And what about Oedipus, the son, the husband, the wise king of Thebes? How did he react to this horrifying truth? Oedipus, unlike Jocasta, did not choose death as an escape, but he also could not accept the harsh truth about himself. In utter agony, in the torment of conscience and overwhelming shame, Oedipus performed a haunting and tragic act of self-punishment. He gouged out his own eyes. Can you imagine the scene of Oedipus using Jocasta's brooch, the very object that had taken her life, to destroy his own eyes? It is a horrifying, gruesome sight, but also full of symbolic meaning. Oedipus's act of blinding himself is not merely a physical self-punishment, a way for him to vent his pain and remorse. It also carries a deeper symbolic meaning. It is a spiritual awakening, Oedipus's belated enlightenment. You see, before Oedipus was sighted physically, he could see the outside world, but he was spiritually blind, unable to see the truth about himself, about his family, about his cruel fate. But when the truth was exposed, when tragedy struck, Oedipus truly saw. He saw through everything, he understood the nature of the tragedy, he recognized his role and responsibility in this tragedy, and the act of blinding himself is a manifestation of that spiritual awakening. Oedipus accepted the truth, accepted his guilt, and accepted punishment. From a king sighted but blind, Oedipus became physically blind but spiritually enlightened. A tragic transformation, but also one of nobility. Not only did he physically punish himself, Oedipus also sentenced himself to exile, leaving the city of Thebes, abandoning his throne and family, to live a life of miserable and lonely wandering. This verdict was not imposed by anyone else, but Oedipus issued it himself, willingly accepting it. Oedipus understood that his presence in Thebes was a defilement, a curse upon the city. To atone for his sins, to appease the gods' anger, and to bring peace back to Thebes, he had to leave, to sacrifice himself. Oedipus's act of self-exile shows a deep self-awareness of his guilt and responsibility. He did not blame fate, did not resent others, but bravely accepted responsibility for the crimes he had committed, even unintentionally. This is the noble point, the admirable aspect of the character Oedipus, even in utter tragedy. You see, in the tragedy of Oedipus Rex, we cannot find a true villain in the true sense of the word. The characters in the story, from Laius, Jocasta, to Oedipus, Tiresias, Creon, are all victims of fate, of ignorance, and of their own actions. They all made mistakes, all had weaknesses, all had to pay the price for their choices. The tragedy of Oedipus Rex is not a story about good versus evil, about justice and wickedness, but a story about humanity and fate, about responsibility and choice, about truth and ignorance. But even in that utter tragedy, we still see glimmers of humanity, noble qualities of mankind. It is Oedipus's courage in facing the truth, his nobility in admitting guilt and punishing himself, his profound self-awareness of his responsibility. These qualities, though revealed in tragedy, still make us ponder and admire. The tragedy of Oedipus Rex is not just a sad story, but also a profound lesson about human nature, about the value of truth and personal responsibility. At this point, our initial question is raised again. Is Oedipus truly innocent, or is he still responsible for his actions, even if unintentional? After going through the entire case file, perhaps you already have your own answer. I think that the story of Oedipus Rex is not intended to judge Oedipus's guilt, but to raise a larger issue, the issue of personal responsibility in a world where humans always face objective factors, unpredictable fates. In life, we are always influenced by many external factors, things we cannot control: genetic predispositions, living environment, social circumstances, unexpected events. These factors can greatly affect our lives and destinies, but that does not mean we completely lose the freedom of choice and responsibility for our actions. We may not control fate, but we always have the right to choose how to face fate, how to behave in each specific circumstance, and take responsibility for the consequences of our actions. Oedipus, in his tragic story, clearly shows us that he is a victim of a cruel prophecy. He unintentionally killed his father and married his mother, but he is not entirely innocent, because he still had his own choices, and it was his wrong choices, stemming from arrogance, hot-temperedness, and blindness, that pushed him into tragedy. But in the end, Oedipus chose to face the truth, accept responsibility, and punish himself. This action of his, though tragic, shows a noble quality of mankind: the ability to self-awareness, to take responsibility, and to rise above tragedy. That is the deepest lesson that the tragedy of Oedipus Rex wants to send to us, those living in the modern world, full of challenges and uncertainties. Always be alert, wise, and brave to face the truth, even if it is the harshest truth. And always remember that it is our choices that will shape our own fate. Hopefully, through decoding the Oedipus Rex case, we not only understand a classic tragedy better, but also can draw valuable lessons for our own lives. What do you think about this case? Do you have any thoughts, feelings you want to share? Let's continue discussing. And so, the Oedipus Rex case file is officially closed. We've journeyed together through every page, explored every corner of this tragedy. From the testimonies of witnesses to the symbolically rich evidence, everything has been carefully examined and analyzed. And perhaps, at this moment, you too can feel the greatness and timelessness of the Oedipus Rex story. It's not just an ancient Greek myth, a tale about a king and a plague. But deep down, it is a timeless lesson about human nature, about fate, about truth, and about responsibility. The lessons from the tragedy of Oedipus Rex, even after thousands of years of history, remain valuable to this day. It reminds us of the danger of arrogance, when hubris can cloud reason and lead us to terrible mistakes. It warns us about blindness, not only physical but also spiritual, when we deliberately avoid the truth, afraid to face ourselves. And it encourages us to always be brave in confronting the truth, even if it is the harshest truth, because only the truth can liberate us from the darkness of ignorance and tragedy. In modern society today, can you see shadows of Oedipus somewhere around you? I think you can, perhaps in blind leaders, stubbornly defending wrong views, refusing to listen to dissenting voices, leading to erroneous decisions with serious consequences. Perhaps in complex family relationships, where secrets and lies pile up, creating hard-to-heal heart wounds. It could also be in ourselves, when we deliberately avoid unpleasant truths about ourselves, about our lives, for fear of facing changes and challenges. So what do you think about the story of Oedipus Rex? After decoding this case with me, what lessons have you learned for yourself from this timeless tragedy? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel to explore more fascinating and insightful Greek mythology stories together. Goodbye for now, and see you in the next Case Files.